Today we're going to zoom in the Levirate marriages in the Torah and application, the book of Ruth, through our times. The Torah tells us in the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, לא יבוא המוני ומואבי בקהל השם, גם דור עשירי לא יבוא להם בקהל השם עד עולם. An Ammonite and Moabite shall not enter the congregation of God, even the 10th generation shall not enter the congregation of God to eternity. So here the Torah said specifically, there are two nations, Ammon and Moab, that are forbidden to enter, to be part of the Jewish people. This is very different than other places in the Torah. For example, the Torah speaks about Egyptians. If Egyptians wants to convert to Judaism, or Edomites, so they said the third generation can come and join. Even they are not nice to us when we are there, but you know, it's not carried forever. However, there are only two nations, Ammon and Moab, that forbidden to enter the congregation. The beauty of that is the Torah gives two reasons why they are forbidden. The Torah said, one, because of the fact that it did not greet you with bread and water on the road when you are leaving Egypt. So in other words, they have lack of kindness. Lack of kindness because we left Egypt, we are out of slavery, we are hungry, we're thirsty, and they not give us the proper food needed. Even Moshe Rabbeinu offered them payment. And the second is, they said, and because he hired against you Bilam, son of Peor, of Ptor, Aram Naraim, to curse you. So the second one is the portion of Balak that it tells us that they hire Bilam to curse us. So the Torah makes a very clear statement. Ammoni and Moavi, Ammonite and Moabite are forbidden to enter the congregation. So with that in mind, that is a strong biblical prohibition that forbids anybody who is not in that community, in other words, anyone who's outside of that community of Ammonite and Moabite can marry, otherwise you can't. The problem with Ruth, as you know, they call it Moabite. And the minute you use the terminology Moabite, what's the stigma? What's the way that people paint that person? They said right away, it's forbidden. It's not just marry out of faith, it's marry something that the Torah specifically forbids for eternity. That's the issue. Now that matter wasn't clear in the court. It needs to have some type of clarity. And the clarity was that the Torah used the word in a female manner, Ammoni Moavi. Only Ammonite, Moabite male, because the male was the one who did it, and not the female. And it means that that's applied in a sense only to male, but not to people like Ruth, that was a female Moabite. But that idea was not clear at that time. Need to clarify it. But why make it more complicated? Because the Torah tells us it's a great mitzvah of Levirate marriage. And here is the word of the Torah. They said it in a few places. One is here, and they have it also in other places in the Torah. Here in the again book of Deuteronomy, Dvarim, chapter 25, the Torah said, when brothers dwell together, and one of them dies, and he had no child, the wife of the deceased shall not marry outside to a strange man. Her brother-in-law shall come to her and take her to himself as a wife and perform Levirate marriage. Which is, you have a situation, you have like Judah in the Torah, you have three sons. The first son, his name is Er, he married his daughter Tamar. Then Er passed away, Onan married Tamar. Then Onan passed away, and Shelah, supposed, the third son, supposed to marry Tamar, but Yehuda was afraid, since two of his sons died with no children, he was afraid for Shelah, so for a long time Tamar was waiting, until they have all kind of, the relations that created that baby, to the twin sons. But the point is, in that sense, it was some type of Levirate marriage, which is, and that's a little bit Kabbalistic concept. The Nachmanides explained it beautifully in the book of Genesis. Nachmanides said that when you have a person that die and his brother is a single, the soul is still in the family. In other words, there is a continuation of the soul. It's like, in our language, some type of spark, transmigration of soul. And since one brother is no longer among the living, there is a chance to perpetuate the soul within the family by redeeming that soul, which is the widow should be married, as at least as the first choice, to his single brother, who redeem her by having a child who named after the brother. Name, not necessarily name, meaning the soul perpetuated, continued. And that's one of the sins that Torah called upon Onan in the book of Bereshit, that Onan, the son of Yehuda, and basically felt that I should marry Tamar just to perpetuate my brother's name. He was selfish. He figured out why I need to bother with that. So he didn't want to make a proper relations with Tamar, and as a result, it was create anger in the eye of God, and he died too. So, in one hand, there is an obligation of Levirate marriage. The big question is, since the husband of Ruth passed away with no children, and since you recognize Ruth as a convert to Judaism because she is female Moabite, therefore, who has the obligation to redeem her? The closest relative, the family. If you look at the chart in my book, I spent a lot of hours to put in my book Ruth Talk, question answers in the book of Ruth. There is a special long chart that gives an explanation. So you see in this chart, what happened is that there's no other way but to go to the closest relative, and the closest relative of the deceased, the husband Machlon, the husband of Ruth, was a fellow by the name of Ploni Almoni, which is a big question. Who was Ploni Almoni? If it's a real name or his real name is Tov, but he rejected that option. Originally speaking, he wanted, but then he realized that it's involved not only redemption of property, but redemption of Ruth, and he rejected it, either because he was married or for other reasons. And then the next in kin was Boaz, who in a way fulfilled the idea of mitzvah of Levirate marriage. And that's the reason why they use the term redeemer a lot of time in the book of Ruth, because Boaz was a redeemer of Ruth, because he married her as a person that looking for the closest relative to perpetuate the name of the deceased, which was Machlon, or in that sense Saraf, the brother of Yoash. So we derive from this a lot of things. If we zoom in the whole history of Ruth, where she came from, the story of Lot and his family, and how she came from a family that neglected kindness, and she came back and she brought kindness by doing all this kindness to her mother-in-law Naomi, and then she married to someone who fulfilled kindness. So in a sense, kindness came to merge with the kindness, which is the kindness that came from Abraham, from Judah, to Boaz, returned to kindness of Ruth, that again originated in that sense from the house of Abraham. So let's zoom in some sentences from the book of Ruth that dealing with this returning kindness, which is coming from kindness and returning to kindness. So let's zoom in the book of Ruth, and what we're doing now is a little bit from the chapter 4. ובועז עלה השער וישב שם. Boaz meanwhile had gone to the gate and sat down there. So the rabbi tells us that Boaz was a judge. He get to the court and he sat there, and just happened, והנה הגואל עובר. So they don't use the name. Either it's Ploni Almoni or Tov, but that's the closest kin for redemption. Asher diber Boaz, whom Boaz has spoken, passed by in the previous chapter, he said to Ruth, you remember we studied it, he said to Ruth that he's the closest relative that take precedent before me, and I want to give him the option to be the first one. So Vayomer Suva Shvana, Ploni Almoni, he said, come over, sit down here, Ploni Almoni, which is not clear if it's real name or not, either that it's the rabbis used the derogatory. They said Alman of mitzvot, that he doesn't know the rules, that Ammoni, not Ammonite, Moabi, not Moabite, or it was a real name. Vayasa Vayeshav, and he came and said. So again, you see here that nothing came by coincidence. That all of a sudden they get to the court and he came in. Vayikach 10 anashim. He took 10 men of the older of the city, which again teaches the value of the minyan and the value of the gathered 10 people, in order to make the court valid, okay, and the decision valid. Vayomer shvu po vayeshevu, he said sit here and they sat down, which is formulating here a form of court, and he was a judge earlier. Some said that he was Ivtzan, so therefore he formulated the court. So now we give him an option. Vayomer lagoed, he said to the Redeemer. Why we call him Redeemer? Because of the concept of Levirate marriage. So he's basically the closing kin, so he can be the one who redeems. And he said, Chelkat hasadeh asher le'achinu le'Elimelech, this parcel of land which belongs to our brother Elimelech, Machra Naomi hashava misdeh Moab, has been offered for sale, but Naomi was returned from the field of Moab, which means you have here two issues. You have issue of a land, of a piece of property that originally belongs to the wealthy, past wealthy family of Elimelech. Now you have it by Naomi, and this is her daughter-in-law, Ruth. That property needs a redeemer, someone who take over that leadership, that ownership of that property. And therefore, I resolve as the head of the court that I should inform you to this effect. Excuse me, Kne, you have the option to purchase Neged Yoshvim po bayit, in the presence of those sitting here, which means at the front of the court, you can, because you are the close kin to the deceased, you can take over the property. V'neged ziknei, in the presence of the elder of my people. But he said, im tigal geal, if you are willing to redeem, redeem. V'im lo yigal, but if you are not redeemed, I give you the option, meaning I, Boaz, give you the option, since you are the closest relative, to take over that land. But if you don't wish to, tell me, v'anochi acharecha, and I may know, I'll be the next one, for there is no one else to redeem but you, and I am after you. So that fellow, Ploni Almoni Otov, said, oh, anochi yigal. Sure, I'm willing to redeem. Someone gives you a piece of land and said, you want to take over the piece of land? Oh, sure, give it to me. It's worth a lot of money. So Vayomer Boaz tell him, he said to him, wait a second. I want you to know one thing. B'yom knotcha sadeh miyad Naomi. He said that all of that is a condition. Guess what's going to happen? The day that you're going to purchase that land, meaning that you take over the ownership, not necessarily with cash, but you take over the leadership from Naomi. It's also me'et Ruth Moaviyah. It's also from Ruth the Moabite. She also partake of the ownership of that property. Eshet Amet, she's the wife of the deceased of Machlon. Guess what's happened? Kanita lehakim shem amet al nachlato. So right away, since you get it from the wife of the deceased, from the family of the deceased, you're perpetuating the name of the deceased on his inherited. Which means the deal here is not only involved with purchasing or getting the property, it's also involved with redemption of person, which is Ruth. Why? Because you have to have the continuation of the man and his property, which implies that the minute you marry Ruth and you have children, so then is a continuation of the name of the deceased toward his inheritance. So the inheritance, it's a package deal that involves with the property and the person as well. Now he changed his mind. So Vayomer HaGoel, and the Redeemer said, wait a second, Lo ucha ligol li, pen ashchit et nachlati, then I cannot redeem it for myself. Forget it. No deal. Why? He says, lest I imperil my own inheritance. So there are several commentators that deal with that. The Malbim and others say that he was married, afraid of the friction between his children or his wife, and in those days it wasn't issue of polygamy, so it was permitted. But some said that was his fear. Others said that he just doesn't want to bother with all of that. So he said, if that's the case, if it's all conditioned that I need also to marry Ruth, he says, no. Take over my redemption responsibility on myself, for I am unable to redeem. Unable, you can say it either positive or negative. He was afraid of his wife or children, or unable, he wasn't in a desire to do it. So now is a statement that dealing with the formality of all the transactions. Vezot lefanim miYisrael. Formally, this was done in Israel in case of redemption. Ala geula ve'ala tmura lekayem kol davar. In order to exchange the transactions, to validate any matter, what did they do? Shalaf ish na'alo. The Torah speaks about the law of chalitza in Yibum, that in order to make the levirate marriage, a person need to take off his shoes, okay? Venatan lere'eu, and he drew his shoes and give it to the other. Vezot ha'tudah b'Yisrael, and this was a process of ratification in Israel, which means it was a ritual part that the person need either to take the process of redeeming the person, or it's a ritual involved with the shoe. Why the shoe? That some rabbi said, I heard it from Rabbi Aviner. Some rabbis said that shoe is something that you don't usually contribute to. It's something very personal. And there's some sources in the Torah that speaks about the value of shoe. You see that taking of the shoe, and shoe is some certain persona in that sense. So he said that in order to make it, it's a ritual involved here, that you need to take off the shoe. He said to elders, you are the witness this day, and he drew his shoe. He buy it for yourself, and he said, take off his shoe, and he did it. So Boaz make a declaration. Vayomer Boaz lazkenim v'chol ha'am. Boaz said to the elders and all the people, Atem edim atem hayom. You are witness this day. כי קניתי את כל אשר לאלימלך ואת כל אשר לחיליון ומחלון מיד נעמי. That I have brought all that was Elimelech and all that was Chilion and Machlon from the hand of Naomi. Which means, first is the idea that is a transactions over the property. Which means I'm redeeming the property that originally belongs to Elimelech and his wife Naomi and their family. I'm taking over that property. Vegam, but in addition, et Ruth HaMoaviyah eshet Machlon. But in addition to that, what is more, I also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the wife of the deceased Machlon. Why? He was a righteous man. He said, I'm doing it lehakim shem hamelech, to perpetuate the name of the deceased on inherited. Which means it's not only Levirate marriage, is the deepest meaning of the marriage, which is to have perpetuation of the name toward the children by marrying the wife of the deceased, which means he's not just redeeming the property and using the property for good, he's also redeeming the soul of Ruth, which is originally the soul of her husband, by having unity of a husband and wife between Boaz and Ruth, and toward the future child, there is a spark, there is a continuation of the deceased that died childless, which is the Machlon. And he added to that, and he said, "Velo yikaret shem hamet me'im echav u'mishar mekomo." He said it specifically that the name of the deceased not be cut off from among his brethren. What does that mean, cut off? If a person died childless and there's nobody to carry on the name, you may say that there is, in our language, someone you can designate to say Kaddish, but it's a sad situation that there's no future. So by marrying Ruth and having together a child and taking that land is basically continuing the name of the deceased. It's not necessarily naming the new child the same name, but carrying the spark of the soul. Eidim atem hayom, you are witness today. So that was a very brave act. First of all, with all the idea of one hand, the Torah forbids Moabite and Ammonites. Now they clarified that it's okay with the female. Number two, he was a well-established person. He wasn't young, was elderly person, well-to-do. It's a lot of obstacles for Boaz, but he did it. He was a brave man, and he did it because that was the right thing to do. ויאמרו כל העם אשר בשער, everyone was there, get their approval. All the people were at gate. והזקנים עדים, also the court of the elderly people, they said that we are witness. And not just that, they had a blessing, that we use that blessing when we partaking in a wedding. What we said, under the chuppah, we said this blessing, ייתן השם את האישה בעל ביתך, כרחל וכלאה. May the Almighty make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, אשר בנו שתיהם את בית ישראל. Both of them build up the house of Israel. So here they use the word Rachel before Leah, which is several explanations why, but in general, these are the foremothers of these great 12 tribes. ועשה חיל באפרתה, and you may prosper in Ephrat. Ukra Shem bebet lechem, and famous in Bet Lechem. You remember the beginning of the chapter, of the first chapter, we talk about Lechem, that Elimelech was a great man there. And now everything turned around, so he needs to bring back all these situations to a good, not only prosperity, but also good name. V'hi beitcha, and may your house, kebeit peretz, like the house of Peretz, asher ילדה תמר ליהודה, whom Tamar bore to Judah, מן הזרע אשר ייתן השם לך מן ההרעדה הזאת. From the offspring which Hashem will give you, this young woman. Because who is this Peretz? Peretz was the child that was born as a unity between Yehuda and his daughter-in-law, right? And he was the first baby that was born there, right? But the seed that came out of Peretz, the great grandson, is Boaz, and he basically fulfilled the same obligation as Yehuda has to his daughter-in-law, by having a child that perpetuated the name of the deceased. So in that blessing, he gave the blessing that the same righteousness that Tamar was to Yehuda and Judah was to Tamar, in a sense that he justified it and he became the leader of the tribes. So the same here, the blessed Boaz, that's the future child that come out of this unity will be the leader that come out of this young woman. And we all know the result. The end of the book of Ruth, the great-grandson was David. So one of the reasons we have this book is not only to clarify the conversion of Ruth, but also to show that everything was an act of kindness, that came from kindness, go to kindness, and his all act, Levirate marriage, is the foundation of kindness. You see it, the young widow, and the childless, and the man passed away, so you'll be kind enough to redeem, in a sense, to have continuation of future generation toward that unity. ויקח בועז את רות ותהילו לאישה, so Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. ויבוא אליה, and he have relation with her, ויתן השם לה הריון ותלד בן. So the Almighty let her conceive, and she bore a son. So here you see miracle upon miracle upon miracle. Ruth did not convert to Judaism in the first place in order to have anything to do with children, and he turned to be a child. Boaz, who was already mourned over passing his wife, was elderly, have out of this unity quickly a child. but it's all a God plan. It's like you take a tapestry, you turn around the tapestry, you see that there's no connection between the lines. Then you turn around, you see a gorgeous picture. You see how the Almighty put together those souls that's so distant, so afar, but they're all in the same foundation of kindness and bring the spark together. So therefore, Vatomarna Anashim el Naomi, so, you know, all the ladies around that community, they said to Naomi, Baruch Hashem, thank God, blessed is God, Asher lo ishbit lach goel hayom, who did not left you without a Redeemer today, which means this is again show you that God's come in whenever you put your trust in God, right, and then you pull all your faith in God, God show up and help. And they said, bless are you God that He redeemed you and didn't left you alone. V'yikareh shmo b'Yisrael. And not just that, may His name be famous among Israel. So they're all happy for her. And it's not just happy for her. And they said to Naomi, to Ruth, mother-in-law, and they bless her that is somebody to continue the name. Because imagine, Naomi lost her husband. She lost the 2 sons. The daughter-in-law, Orpah, returned back. The graves of the 3, the husband and 2 sons, are in Moab. And nothing left there, all the wealth. So it was a very embittered situation. Now everything turned around and is a very good ending with a Redeemer. And not just that, and the blesser v'hayalach is like prognostication, is like prophecy. They said, v'hayalach lemeshiv nefesh, He will become your life restorer, which was a prophecy, ulekalchel et tzevatech, to sustain you in old age, ki ka'alatech asher ahavatech yiladatu, for your daughter-in-law that you love so much, daughter-in-law, who loves you, has born him, asher היא טובה לך משמעה בנים, she's better to you from more than the 7 sons. So there are some commentators that deal with the 7. It's that connected to the story of Hannah and the 7 sons or not. But basically, it's the idea that this child is going to bring you so much good. In that sense, more than having 7 sons. ותיקח נעמי את הילד ותשיתהו בחיקיה ותהי לו לאומנת. Naomi took the child and had it in her bosom, and she became his nurse. So in that sense, Naomi took the responsibility of this child. That's the future. Now there's a new baby that come with this unity, and there is a midrashim that said that Boaz passed away right after that event. But anyway, Naomi is the one who took the responsibility, and she was the one who was the nurse for this baby. And now again, something that we can learn is Vatikrena lo ashchenot shem lemor. In the naming of a child is a lot of different sources in the Torah that are dealing with naming. Sometimes you see Vayikra, which means that the father called. Sometimes Vatikra, with Tav, that the mother called. Here, Vatikrena lo ashchenot. The neighbors call the baby name, which is another subject for discussion. But the neighbors have a name, and they said, Yulad ben, you can say it out loud, it's fine, Yentes, whatever. The neighbors, right? They called Yulad ben Naomi. They said, oh, look, there is a son who's born to Naomi. What do you mean? It's not son of Naomi, it's a son of Ruth and Boaz. But all the, how do you say it, Yentes, right? All the women around, they said, oh, Naomi has a baby now. She's old. But they call it is the baby of Naomi. Vatikrena. So again, it's the second time in this pasuk that the neighbors, they call this baby Oved. They call him the name of Oved. Oved is, in a simple way, is a servant of Hashem, servant of God. And at the top of that, they said, Avi Yishai Avi David. That the name of Oved is the father of Yishai, Jesse, and is a grandfather of David. And some Midrashim said that Ruth merited to be not only to see King David, but even to sit at the throne of King Solomon when he appointed as a king and build the Beit HaMikdash. That's one of the mind-boggling but very interesting Midrashim that speak about the tremendous chud that Ruth have a long life. It's one of the Midrashim. But here we're going to the end, which dealing with all the inheritance and how the family tree come together, and we're going to deal with that in the next session.